If you have your Bibles, turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. As you turn there, I want you to think about what love is. What is love? If you can try to define it, it's hard to define, but there are certain characteristics about it that 1 Corinthians 13 tells us a little bit about it. But as you think about what love is it emotion or is it an action? Hollywood will tell us that love is a romantic feeling of the heart. It's purely an emotion. Hollywood would tell us that love is something you can't help to experience. You fall in love, like you fall into a ditch. You didn't mean to, wasn't planning on it, but you just happen to fall in love. Or you can also, and it's not for you to be beating yourself up about this, but you can fall out of love. I'm sorry, honey. I didn't mean to, but I just don't love you anymore. I fell out of love. It's kind of this idea you can't help who you love. You've got to go with your heart. You just got to love that which you love and can't help it. You're a victim, if you would. It's like some type of disease that you get. So some biblical counselors, in opposition to this notion of just raw emotions that you can't help, some biblical counselors kind of go to the other extreme and say love is merely a command. It's all commands. It's just actions. You're to be good. You're commanded to even love your enemies. You don't have to have affection in your heart towards them. You don't have to be feeling warm and fuzzy towards your enemies, but you still to do good to them. And husbands, you're to love your wives. Wives, you're to love your husbands. It doesn't matter how you feel. Your feelings have nothing to do with it. So it's just commands. Well, I think these are two extremes. I think love definitely is an emotion, but it is also a command. It's both ands. But another question we need to ask ourselves is love something that is drawn out of us, or is it something that is put in us? It depends on what you believe about depravity, human nature, but is love something that's just drawn out of you? Something, something that is lovable on the outside of you attracts your attention. Romeo saw Juliet, and once he saw her, he was smitten instantly. And it just drew the love out of him. It pulled it out. And the things that are lovely, that you crave, it brings attraction to you, that is attractive and you desire and want, that pulls out your affections. The things that are despisable and ugly, and that makes your love shrink, and it doesn't pull it out. Pulls out your hate and so forth. So is love merely something that is pulled out of you? Or is love something that has to be put into you? That human nature, because of depravity, because you're a slave to sin, love is not something you inherently have within you. You don't have love. It can't be pulled out of you. Even if you saw the most lovable thing in the world, which is God, and God was set before you, you would hate God of your own accord. Love is not something that is pulled out of us. We're not the source of love. We're not the originator of it. We don't have it. We're depleted of it. You said, what about, does grandmas and grandpas who are not Christians, can they not love their grandkids? Well, there's a form of natural affections, of course. But the problem with the concept of love, and the reason we have problems with it, is we don't really have a good definition of it. The world has tricked us, and in fact, it's our flesh that tricks us. We have a counterfeit love, a cheap knockoff that has some of the same characteristics of love. So at first glance, when we feel the feeling, we call it love. Like I love ice cream. I love shrimp. I love steak. I love a lot of things. And we call that love. You know, guys love girls. Well, I hope they do. Girls love guys. You know, we say, well, I'm in love. I love. And love, this counterfeit love, this cheap knockoff, is not the real thing. It's the world's love. They call it love. They identify it with that term, but it's nothing more than lust. Lust, the lust of the flesh. And it's similar to real love because it is an emotion. It's a passion. It's a craving. Love does desire that which the object that it's attached to. If you love God, you desire God, to be near God. You run to God because you love God. When you hate something, you run away from something. So when you love something, you're drawn to that thing. Well, when you lust after something, it's a strong passion or craving. You're drawn to the thing you're craving. So it's an emotion, it's a craving, it draws you. And love is sacrificial. When you love something or somebody, you'll sacrifice. Well, lust, believe it or not, will have a measure of sacrifice. You and I will go to the restaurant and lay down some heavy cash in order to get a good meal. And we'll sacrifice for ice cream. We'll sacrifice, some men will sacrifice for their ladies. They'll open the car door, they'll buy flowers, they wine and dine, they do all this effort. And that's sacrifice. And look how much he loves me. Look how much he's sacrificing. Look how much he's spending on me. Look at all the attention he's given me. But just like you're craving food, sometimes you crave the opposite sex. You got these longings and cravings. And even to the point that you will, to some measure, give up other things to obtain it, to get it. And I'll tell you, most marriages in America, in fact the world, is based upon not love, based upon lust. I got to have this girl. I got to have this guy. I can't live without them. So they say to themselves, I'm in love. But it's no more love than hate. Because it's the end goal, the end difference between lust and love. Love is unselfish. And the glory and the joy and the benefit of that which you love is your chief desire. Lust, the chief desire in lust is self. You know, if I loved ice cream, I wouldn't consume it. I mean, that's not very nice to ice cream. You know, I'm destroying it for my own gratification, right? And think about how many marriages is built on the same concept. It's not for better or for worse, but it's better and it hopefully don't get worse. It's mutually beneficial as long as the contract is good and, you know, you're scratching my back, I'll scratch your back, I'll sacrifice, I love you, but you're loving me, you look good, I feel good when you're next to me, it's satisfying to be with you, I'm happy with you. But once the spouse starts misbehaving or not looking as attractive to you, or all of a sudden I've fallen out of love, I no longer crave you anymore, no longer desire you anymore. I've fallen out of love. That's the way the world is. It's not for better and worse. It's just simply you provide me something I want. And that's selfish. And that's the heart of hate. It disguises itself as love, but it's not the real thing. You see, natural man doesn't have the real thing. It's from God. We don't have it. In fact, once we start defining what it is and looking at its characteristics, we'll see that this stuff is supernatural. It is glorious. It's beautiful. In fact, that's the title of my sermon, The Beauty of Love. But we have to see that the only way we can love God is of God to put love in us. The only thing we can love, only way we can love one another is God put his love in us so that we can love others with it. Let's read our text. And notice in this text, verses 4 through 7 of 1 Corinthians 13, there's 14 characteristics describing love. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast, is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way, is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. These things are nothing like the lust of the flesh, the cravings of the body. Lust is ugly. Lust is ugly because lust will exploit others for self-benefit. Joyfully exploit others. When you're eating your food that you love, you're joyfully exploiting it for your own joy, for your own benefit. But love is when you exploit yourself, you sacrifice yourself, wear yourself out, where you pour yourself out, not self-beneficial, at least it doesn't seem to be self-beneficially, for the betterment, the joy, and the good of someone else. These 14 characteristics can be summarized into 3 major attributes. There's 14 of them listed here, but if we kind of group them together in the things that they seem to have in common, we got 3 overarching attributes that helps us define what love is. 3 things this morning to define love and the beauty of love. 1, love is not selfish. 2, love endures abuse. 3, love gives of self. So love is not self-focused, it's not selfish, it's not let me get what I can get out of this world. Love will even deplete itself and be abused by others when you love something. And 3rd, love is going to give. And in fact, this is the very character of God. God is love. He is all these things. First of all, let's look at this. Love is not selfish. To me, depravity could be rephrased to selfishness. Selfishness is the heart of all sin. Every commandment is broken because of selfishness. Selfishness is the root of every evil. Putting self at the top, putting self above others, not loving God above yourself, not loving your neighbor as yourself, but putting self as your God. And everybody is born, everyone who's born in this world is born as a God to himself. I'm going to live for me. It's about me. I mean, that's the nature of little kids. You say, little kids are not sinful. No, they're living for themselves. It's all about them. The whole world rotates around them. And teenagers are not any better if they're not converted. In fact, us adults are not any better. We just know how to disguise it better. We know how to pretend like we're not selfish, all the while we are. It's our default position to be selfish, to be self-centered. But love is not selfish. 1 Corinthians 10:24 says, no one should seek his own good, but the good of others. Romans 15:2, each of us should please our neighbors. And this is the first characteristic of the unselfishness of love is there in verse 4. Love does not envy. It's not envious. Envy is the feeling of resentfulness when someone else is blessed. Where you're resentful. You don't, it's like a little negative feeling when someone else is lifted up or exalted or blessed or gets something. It's the nature of the world to be envy. I mean, all the TV commercials that sell vehicles, they sell it through envy so that you can drive your new car and other people can look at what you have and be envious because they know you know what it feels like seeing someone else's nice car and feeling that envy. So they market vehicles, they market everything basically on trying to make you discontent and envious of what you do not have. But love is not envious of others' stuff or others' positions or power or blessings or exaltation. think about this, kids. Listen to me. If I had $100 here, and I said, I'm going to give it to one of you kids, first one that raises their hand, I'm going to give you a $100 bill. Right there, this kid right here is taking me up on this. We should all pitch in and get him $100. Now, let's pretend we're going to give this boy a $100 bill. How many of you other kids are so happy for him? I mean, if you win something, you're going, yeah, I won. But what if someone else wins? Are you going to go just as excitedly going, yes, they won. They got it. They got the $100. I'm so happy for them. I'm excited that they're blessed because you care about them. Now that's love. That's love, and it's so contrary to human nature. But envy, the Bible tells us in James 3, it says, where envy is, there's selfish ambition and disorder in every evil practice. Envy is something that's of the flesh, of the devil, and it's not of love. Love finds happiness in giving, not receiving. That's why the Bible does truly say it is more blessed to give. I never understood that verse as a child. When I was a child, I was like, man, Christmas is the best time of the year. That's when I get stuff. What do you mean it's better to give presents than to get them? That's so contrary. But if you truly understand love and you have love in your heart, you really are more blessed. You're happier. You're really happier when you see the people you love get things that are beneficial for them, helpful for them. Secondly, why love is not selfish, we see in verse 4, because love does not boast. It's humble. Boasting is putting self on display. It's look at me. It's trying to get attention for some accomplishment or some gift. It's seeking a platform for himself. It's self-promotion. But the Bible tells us, let another man praise you. It's love doesn't say, look at me. Love is happy to be in the shadows and others in the spotlight. Love doesn't want to sit at the top of the best seats at the table, but rather sit at the lowest seat and wait for someone else to call them up. You see, love is not focused on self. Self is not the goal. Ambition is not the goal. Self-honor is not the goal. We rather see other people exalted and lifted up than yourself being honored or lifted up. In other words, love is humble. Peter tells us, be like-minded and sympathetic. Love as brothers. Be tender-hearted and humble. 1 Corinthians 4, verse 6 tells us, Paul says, I've written these things that you may learn in us not to think beyond what is written, that none of you may be puffed up on behalf of one against the other. Who makes you differ from another? And what do you have that you do not receive? Now, if you do not receive it, why do you boast as if you had not received it? You see, most of us don't struggle with verbalizing our pride. We're too prideful for people to see our pride, right? I mean, we don't want to be the arrogant one everybody thinks that guy's prideful. And we don't want that because we want to be humble in their eyes. So we hide our pride, we conceal our pride, but the battle is in our mind. The battle is how we think about others and how we think about ourselves. And we don't let people know our thoughts, but in our minds we struggle thinking we're the better Christian. We struggle with thinking that we're doing things just a little bit better than that person because we're critical of them and we're not so critical of us. We're more critical of others than we are ourselves. And don't we all struggle with that? And it's because we struggle with having love in our heart for others. And it's a form of arrogance and self-exaltation in our own thinking. Pride always begins in our conscience before it's exhibited. And some people are so self-absorbed in their thinking, it can't help but ooze out of them. But we need to fight it in our thoughts. We need to fight it before it comes out, because God sees the hidden men of the heart. You see, thirdly, we see in verse 4, love is not arrogant. It's not selfish because it's not boastful and arrogance. Arrogance is the idea that we're more important than someone else. One time I had a trip paid to Europe, and it's nice when it's not your money to sit in first class. And it's nice when they got these passes that you don't have to take your shoes off and check your bags. You can kind of walk around the lines. Have you ever done that? Am I the only one here that's got to do that? I mean, it's glorious. It's extremely glorious. Well, when you go from airport to airport, you see these long lines, and you're just, and the one of these lines, no joke, they had cookies, and you could walk through the lines, other people taking their shoes off, and you can grab you a cookie and just keep on walking. I mean, this was wonderful. And I noticed, just to be transparent and honest to you, I noticed in my own mind, looking at the long lines and going, you peasants. I mean, it started to do something. I mean, like, I'm a little special here. I'm an important person, and you start feeling important. And you get this idea, I'm an important person. I've done something. I'm accomplishing something. I'm somebody special. And when you have that concept, I'm somebody special because of your accomplishments, your education, or your wealth, or whatever it may be, you begin to look down on the old peasants. And you say, well, I would never do that. Hey, we might be the peasants. Actually, most of us are in that peasant category, but it wouldn't take us 2 seconds to turn into the upper class and look down on the ones that we used to be. That's our human heart. And that's not what love does. I mean, think about Christ. If he didn't have love, he wouldn't have become one of us peasants, one of us worms. I mean, that's love, to become one of us. He's glorious. He's above the angels. But he came and dwelt with us. Now that is humbleness. That's love. Fourth reason that love is not selfish is because it's not self-focused. Look at verse 5. It says, love does not insist on its own way. Love is seeking the happiness and the well-being of others, not of self. It's not placing our desires and wishes above the desires and the wishes of others. Truly, we do unto others as we would have them do unto us. It's not bent. Love is not bent on saying, hey, it's got to be my way. We got to do it this way. And that's kind of, if you ever see kids fight over toys, that's the problem. It's the problem. It's like it's revealing something within the heart, that I'm more important than the other kid. This is about me. So love is not selfish. First point. Second point. And this is the one you may not like, but if we don't like it, it's going to reveal that we don't have love. Love endures abuse. And I thought about, well, maybe abuse is too strong of a word, but I said, no, it's probably not strong enough. Love endures abuse. Ever hear people say, I'm not going to take anything from anybody? They got the idea, you're not going to cross me, you're not going to double cross me, you're not going to walk on me. I'm not taking that from you. It's a kind of a hard attitude. I'm not going to be taken advantage of. I'm not going to be abused. If you ask me to go 1 mile, as far as I'm going to go is that 1 mile. I'm not going to do 2 miles. If you ask for a jacket, I'm definitely not going to give you my coat too. I'm not going to give you more than you ask. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be taken advantage of here. That's the heart of selfishness. Well, what about, it's our enemies. Well, the Bible says we're to love our enemies. You say I'm to be walked on? He's like, Jeff, you're going crazy talk. But before you start rebuking me, think about how much you abuse Christ Jesus and he's endured it. And think of who you'd be and where you'd be if God didn't take your abuse. You ever heard someone say, I don't deal with stupid? Well, first of all, love endures abuse because look at verse 4. Love is patient. That is, love deals with stupid people. It's patient with stupid people. Love is patient with everyone. And it's hard to be patient. It's hard to The reason why it's hard to teach kids to sweep the floor, to learn math. The hardest thing about it is to teach people is having the patience with them. It takes love to be patient. It's like, come on, I got things I got to do. This is about me. I mean, I can't sit here and sacrifice and teach and do this and this and this for you, and I just, I can't do this. It's like the lack of patience is a lack of love. The second reason love will endure abuse is because love doesn't get irritable. Look at verse 5. It's not irritable. I like the word irritable, even though I get irritable a lot. Well, I get irritable when I'm in a deep strain of thought. I'm doing something and I get disrupted. It's like I have to fight that. Like, wait, this is my time. This is what I'm doing. Leave me alone. This is focused on what I want to do. It's like, then irritability comes. It's like, well, I was tired. Yeah, no. But irritability is not based on love. It's not loving. To be irritable is to be easily provoked, easily upset, easily angered. To be irritable is to easily find fault. It's to have a critical spirit. But a critical spirit, ever met someone that's always critical? Picking people apart, and it's like, this person does this, and it's like they're prone to gossip because they enjoy highlighting people's criticisms. We all have things that we're ashamed of, and we have things we're proud of, and the things we're proud of, we display. We put the trophies on the mantle. Look at that, And the things that we're ashamed of, the F's that we got in school, we throw those report cards in the trash and shred them. We don't want people to know that. So we naturally cover up our own insecurities and failures, right? We do that. And we don't talk about them. Then why do we talk about other people's failures? We're putting their failures on display to other people's ears so that they can see their failures. We wouldn't want other people to talk about our failures, would we? But we're critical of others, and we kind of enjoy it. We have this tendency to enjoy criticizing people, and because it makes ourselves feel just a little bit better, a little more superior, and because we become the judge. And being the judge, it means that we know everything is right about what we're doing, and so it's a form of thinking better of ourselves and thinking lesser of others and getting joy out of that. Someone who's always finding fault, never satisfied. But love endures this, and love is one who is not irritable, who can cover sins. Bible says, 1 Peter 4:8, above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. The only way a church can stay together, because love is the thing that unifies us, it keeps us unified, love. The only thing that can keep you married is if you have love that just covers these failures. Doesn't highlight them. Not just don't highlight them and speak about them to others. You got to not allow your mind to speak about them. Where you're rotating in your mind and you're building a case against someone. No. Love covers that, and we'll see, it thinks the best of others. See, love is not bitter. Verse 5 says it's not bitter. And I've talked about this before because I've experienced in my own life that when we're wounded, and being wounded is not sinful. When someone abuses you and you hurt, you're offended, it's truly crushing to your soul. We've all experienced that. And that's perfectly fine to be hurt. But what's not fine is that response that the flesh says you need to be bitter. And hurt turns into bitterness and resentfulness quickly. And then when you're hurt, devil says, oh, easy target. I'm going to come in and sow the seeds of bitterness in your heart. I'm going to get you to be a little bitter towards that person. And that bitterness is the beginning. It's the beginning phases of hate, the beginning phases of all types of evil thoughts. But the Bible tells us whoever conceals an offense promotes love, but he who brings it up separates friends. The King James Version translates this as not bitterness, but love thinketh no evil. That is, love is not assuming the worst in people. It's not thinking like, that person did this. Well, it's not quickly jumping to the worst case scenario or even to a bad scenario. It's going to, you know how some people come to you and they have come to you and you say, you did this to me and you didn't know you offended them. You really didn't. And then when you go to explain it, you go, well, this is what I was thinking. They go, oh, well, that makes sense. I'm not as offended anymore seeing what you were doing. You know, once you can explain why you did something, a lot of times the offense is gone because they saw that it wasn't in your heart to be offensive. It wasn't in your heart to be attacking them. You weren't intending to do that, but they read into it because it's like, well, it seems to me by the evidence, it seemed to me that you did this on purpose. It seemed to me that you didn't like me. It seemed to me that you were trying to hurt me. And it's like, no, love doesn't quickly go to that. It doesn't quick to think that the worst. The NIV translates this bitterness as love does not keep records. It doesn't hold on. And this is where the bitterness comes in. You're holding on to something. You're not quickly letting it go. You're not covering it up. You're not forgiving it in your heart. You're holding it in. You know, this is what will destroy your marriage is like when your wife does this, you take it and you don't respond to it. You don't deal with it properly. You don't cover it up with love, but you put it into the ammunition bag, you know, your little bag that you carry. And then the next thing she does, you put that in your bag. And then when you've had enough, the straw that breaks the camel's back, you start dumping everything out for the last 2 years. Hey, look, you always do this, and you did this, and you do this. It's like, where did all this stuff come from? Why am I now just hearing about this? That's just keeping records. You're keeping it to use it upon someone. Listen, when you cover it up, it's gone. It's like you've thrown the sin into the sea. It's not to be recalled. It's not to be brought back up. If you didn't deal with it then, you don't have a right to bring it back up later. Love doesn't keep these records. Thank the Lord loves us. Thank the Lord He doesn't have a record on us. All of it's gone. It's like that we've never done anything. That is beautiful, but it's hard for us to do. It's hard for us to not have some bitterness and resentfulness towards others who have hurt us. But see, love will take the abuse and it will forgive it. It will do away with it. It will throw it away. Sometimes if it's offensive enough, you may need to go talk to them. But a lot of little stuff, you know, you just need to just throw it away. You see, love does not delight in others' failures. Look at verse 6. It does not rejoice at wrongdoings, but rejoices with the truth. Just as you should be happy when others are blessed, when someone's sins is exposed or they fail at something. You're like, I love when Alabama loses. I just do. I'm sorry. You know, I'm always pulling against them. And it's like when they lose, I'm happy. You know, it's like, and I don't know if I should feel that way. I just do. But that's how sometimes we feel towards our enemies. We like it when they fail or when they're humiliated or humbled. But love doesn't feel that way. Love doesn't rejoice over wrongdoing. It doesn't rejoice when your enemies fall. In fact, it does says love rejoices in the truths. It's not that some truth is vital. But here's the difference. Say you have someone that's living in sin and you know they're in sin and you do love them. You don't delight in their sins, but sometimes if their sin is exposed, it's not that you're glad that their sin is exposed and they're humbled, but you're thinking now the truth is out, now there can be healing. Now there can be reconciliation. Now there can be some good. There can be repentance. Truth is good. I want the truth to be exposed. I love truth. Truth is love loves the truth. It doesn't broadcast the truth. It doesn't broadcast the lies. You remember when Joseph found out Mary was pregnant? He was a righteous man, so he tried to put her away secretly. He didn't just broadcast it for everyone to see. Try to cover it up. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't love truth. And in fact, here's the difference. I thought about this. I was like, here's the difference. Love wants the best for the one who's in sin. Truly does. You know, when someone's just critiquing you because they don't like you, criticizing you because they're upset with you and bitter towards you, they don't really want you to be better. They're not really trying to build you up. It's not helpful critiques. It's not like, let me help you do this a little bit better. It's just don't like you, so they're just criticizing you and making it known to everybody. But if you love someone, you go and help them. But you do it because you truly want what's best for them. Love, fifthly, love endures abuse because it bears all things. Verse 7. Love bears all things, and it goes on to say, love endures all things. If you're a teenage kid and you're disrespecting your mother, I mean, how selfish is that? She loves you. She's invested in you. She's sacrificed for you. And you're disrespecting her. You're not saying, yes, ma'am. You're not honoring her. It's all about self. It's all about yourself, what you want to do. I can't do this, so I want to do this anyway. I mean, how unloving is that response? But think about the godly mother who continues to love that son. What does the mother get out of this? Is it beneficial for her to love a son that continues to sin and rebel? But a mother's not thinking, a godly mother is not thinking, hey, this is what's best for me. Godly mother is thinking, I just want my son or my daughter to be saved. I just want the best for them. I want their happiness and well-being. That's my joy. That's all the payment I need. I don't need any return for all my sacrifice other than the well-being of my child. This is what love is. And it will endure long. It'll suffer long. It'll walk the extra mile. It'll go beyond what is required. It'll give the tunic to the one who's asked for your coat. It'll bless those who curse. It's not in the marriage for better or for better. It's really for better, or even if it's worse. It'll stay by, a loving wife will stay by her husband's side, thick and thin. The Bible tells us in Ephesians 4, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bear with one another in love. We're to bear along with another. I mean, it takes all of us to be patient with one another and bear along with one another and suffer along with each other. Colossians 3:13, bear with one another and forgive anyone who has a complaint. Forgive as the Lord has forgiven you. I mean, this is the key to unity. This will be the, if we have more love, our church will be so, what a wonderful atmosphere. But if we bite and devour one another, I mean, we're going to be split off in all kinds of divisions. My last attribute, or the last attribute I see here in 1 Corinthians 13 is to us, which means he exhausted himself completely. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. So the strength of love is to the strength of your sacrifice. To how much will you give? How much will you serve? How much will you deplete yourself? This is why it's the greatest command. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. In all this, the law is fulfilled. If we just have love, we'll do everything right. We'll be kind, we'll be patient, we'll be filled with all the fruits of the Spirit. And how are we to love? We're to love like Christ loved, who gave himself for us. A new commandment I give you, Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. So you also must love one another. I mean, look around, everybody in this room, in fact, everybody outside this room, all your family members, even the ones that are crazy, every one of us, can you say, I love them? I love them. It's hard to love. Well, my enemies don't pull it out of me. I'm saying, no, love is not something that's pulled out of you. It's something that has to be put in you by God that comes out of you. This is why God loved us while we were yet his enemies. You think we drew out his love? You think we attracted him? It's, oh, there's something in Jeff Johnson. Oh, he's cute. He's lovable. Oh, look, he'll be a mighty servant for me one day. I can see potential in him. He's got potential. No, there was nothing in me that enticed God to love me. Why did he love me? Not because I'm lovable. I mean, I was depraved. I was like a snake. In fact, I hated him. We all did. Why does he love us? Because that's who he is. He's a giver. He gives to the unlovable. He gives to you. He loves you unconditionally. That's unbelievable. But Jesus says, no, I have showed you how to love. I've loved you. I've cleaned your feet. I've served you. I've preached to you. I've given you my time, my energy, my efforts. I've given you my life. I've died for you. I couldn't do anything more than what I've done to you. Everything I did was motivated by love. I never did any act of selfishness. I never thought about myself. I always thought about the glory of God and the good of my people. I've done everything with love. Now, love as I have loved you. 1 John 3:16, by this we know love, because he laid down his life for us, as we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. We're not to divide and criticize one another. We're to die for one another. Verse 17, but whoever has the world's goods and sees his brothers in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him? My little children, let us not love in word and tongue, but in deed and truth. You see, love, we see in verse 4, love is kind. By its very nature, it's kind. Galatians 6:2 says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. To be kind to one another. It's amazing. Kindness is an attribute that's less and less in this world. Just being kind, thoughtful. I know my time is slipping here, but my wife got onto me once. Well, just one time I've done something wrong. I've been an angel ever since then, and no, but she got onto me once, and it was rightfully she needed to. But I was offended by her rebuke because I didn't believe I was doing anything that bad. She says, Jeff, I think our marriage is not doing well. I said, what are you talking about? What do you mean our marriage is not doing good? I mean, I'm faithful, you're faithful. I'm working, you're working. I mean, we're running smoothly. I mean, I'm not hating you. I'm not despising you. My mind's not wandering to other ladies. What are you talking about? This is how guys think. Things are great, And my wife looked at me and says, yeah, but you just don't think about me like you used to. You used to write me notes, and, there'd be things that would indicate that I was on your mind. I just don't know if you're on my mind. That unthoughtfulness is the first thing to slide. We see that in Romans, that they knew God but didn't give thanks to God. They just didn't think about God. It's not like they hated God originally. It begins with just not thinking about God. And that's the beginning of selfishness, being self-focused. And that's the beginning of marriage problems, is just ceasing to be thoughtful. Husbands, think about your wives. Put them on your mind through the day. Put their pictures on your cell phones. Take Michael Jordan off. I have a picture of Michael Jordan on my phone. So, love is kind. Secondly, love is not rude. It's not rude. I looked up this. What does this mean in the various ways of translating this word? It's just any type of act that brings a little bit of embarrassment to someone else. It's not doing something that brings a little measure of shame to someone else. Laughing at them or making fun of them. I mean, we tease sometimes in good faith, and I think that's fine, but I think we got to be careful about just being rude. I've committed that sin thousands of times. Love is giving of self because, thirdly, it prefers the desires and interests of others. Look, I've already hit on this in that it's not selfish, but I'm hitting on it from the other direction, that love doesn't seek its own. It seeks the good of others. It's not self-seeking, it's other-seeking. Philippians 2 tells us, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also the interest of others. 1 Corinthians 10:24, no one should seek his own good, but the good of others. I mean, this is the nature of Timothy. Paul says, I'm going to send Timothy to you. There's no one like him. All the other ministers seek their own. I mean, they're preaching for self-glory. They're preaching to get maybe a financial benefit, or they're doing something because they're self-interest. But not Timothy. This is not about him. He's truly a servant. He's truly serving Christ and serving the church, and he's putting himself last. He's not even thinking about himself. I mean, and when I think of Timothy, I'm like, man, this is the type of minister I want to be. I see this example of Christ and Timothy and others, like, oh, I see the mirror of love, and I go, oh, I see my own imperfections in this beautiful mirror. Oh, that I'd be more like Timothy. Fourth, love gives of itself because love believes the best of others. I mean, we've already talked about how love is not critical, fault-finding. It's not irritable. It's not quickly finding things to complain about in others. But here it says love in the opposite. It believes all things. It believes the best of things. Now, right now you've heard this message. Who of you thought, old Johnny, there's old Johnny, I wish he could hear this one. I mean, who has applied this message to someone else already? You see, that's our human nature. You need this. It's not our human nature to go, I need this. We are quick to think evil of others, the worst of others. We need to flip this around. I need to flip it around. We all need to flip this around. We need to be the most critical towards self and the most forgiving and tolerant towards others. We need to be the most fault-finding in ourselves. But this is how it works. I've seen this. I've seen it myself. I've seen it in others. The one who's always critical usually has a log in their eye. They're picking out these little specks of dust in people's eyes. Oh, look, there's some dust. Look, there's another dust. Hey, there are dusts in people's eyes. There's all kinds of things wrong with me. There's all things. Hey, all of us have all thousands of things that you can find fault with us, don't we? Be honest. If you had a critical spirit, none of us would be able to stand and be friends with anybody. So we got all these specks in our eyes. We need to help each other pick them out. But here's the problem. The one who sees the specks are typically the ones who have a big beam. And that beam is lack of love. Or there's some gross sin that they're covering and hiding. And they got something, secret sins. They're far away from God. In fact, usually you can find yourself, if you're critical, if you're not walking really closely to the Lord. It's one of those, lights on your dash that comes up and say, hey, you need some gas, or you need to check your engine here. One of the things that will indicate how close you are to the Lord is how critical you are. And then one thing that will tell you how close you are by how loving. I mean, and here's the thing we should all be. It's like, I really cannot believe, knowing the corruptions of my heart, knowing how much lack of love I have, knowing my own sins, my own thoughts, and my own battles. I'm battling these things deeply. I know how bad I am. I can't believe Grace Bible Church lets me be a member. I know I'm the chief of sinners. I'm the worst one. Well, there's one worse Christian in here. But he's not sitting at the front anymore. But we should all have that, I got to get this beam out of my eye. And then when you get the beam out of your eye, it's not you enjoy the specks in other people's lives. You really love them. And it's not that you can't help people with specks. But your motivation is no longer, I feel good about this, and I don't like you. The motivation is, I love you, I can help you. We clean ourselves up first so we can help others afterwards. The more critical we are, the usually more selfish we are. But I think love believes all things and it hopes all things. The last phrase it says it hopes all things. And this helped me out, and it helped me out tremendously about 10 years ago. Have you ever dealt with paranoia that, hey, this person, you see two people talking, you're not there, and they look at you, they kind of like look up, and then they go back to talking, and they go, they're talking about me. Ever had that sensation that people are talking about you? Why do you feel that way? It's typically because we're so I worked with a lot of people in my old job that had a lot of mental illnesses, and there was this concept that the people about everything, was about them. And I think it's easy when we're so self-absorbed and self-focused, we just assume that we're the center of their conversation. But also it's not loving to think they're thinking the worst. And I realized I was doing that. I realized that I found myself assuming that people were saying negative things about me and there's something's wrong about them. And I've been thinking the worst of that. And that's like, no, this is not love. This is not what the Bible tells me to do. The Bible tells me to assume the best. Don't assume the worst, assume the best. Now, they may prove otherwise, but until they prove otherwise, I'm going to think the best of them. I'm going to assume the best of them. And it's helped me tremendously to go, I know that person, that they love God, they love their family. That's a good person. I'm just so thankful for them. And once you start thinking the best of people, you're not as paranoid. You're not as critical. So in conclusion, love is a beautiful thing. It's not of this world. It's supernatural. And this is when God is love, and to have love, you have to have God in you. He has to break apart that stony heart of selfishness, self-centeredness. And he has to pour out his love in you. It's not something that is drawn out of you. It's something that has to be infused into you. And you have to understand that. Yes, it's a command that we're to do, but it's a command that we cannot obey until God comes and pours his love in our hearts. And we get love. We obtain love by knowing Christ. Read Ephesians 3 about this prayer, about how we be filled with all the fullness of God. And in that we would understand the width, depth, and height, length of the love of Christ. And it's by the love of Christ and that gives us, having the love of Christ in our hearts, we in turn can love him in return. We can love him with that love. So God has to give us the power to love him. He has to give us the love to love him. And it's only when we have love coming into us that we can love one another. This is why we have to abide in him. And if we don't abide in Christ, we can do no good thing. We'll wither up, critical, self-absorbed, and miserable. You see, we need more love. 1 Corinthians 6:14 says, let all that you do be done in love. Everything we do needs to be motivated out of love for God and love for our neighbor. Love is like a mirror. James talks about the law being a mirror. And when you look at Christ, who is the perfect reflection of love, and you look at how beautiful love is, and you hold it up to yourself, love begins to show you. Don't use the mirror to point to someone else. Even in this message, I'm not thinking of you. I'm thinking of myself. I'm trying to, at least. Like take the mirror. That's why I prepared this sermon. It brought me to tears because I'm not living up to this. I'm not preaching because I've accomplished this. Let's look at Jesus. He's accomplished it. But now take that mirror and look at yourself with it for a moment. Examine yourself with it. And it's transformational. It'll show you the sin and the corruption still within you, and the selfishness and the hate and all these ugly things, and say, come to the light, come and draw yourself to Christ so that you can be filled with love. Because in the end, I'll close with this. This passage is about Jesus Christ. Let's replace love with the word Christ. Christ is patient and kind. Christ does not envy or boast. Christ is not arrogant or rude. Christ does not insist on its own way. Christ is not irritable or resentful. Christ does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Christ bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and in